In the past 150 years, rural Alaska Native communities have experienced many changes to their traditional subsistence lifestyle. Contact with Western missionaries, traders, and eventual American citizenship have created pressure for Alaska Natives to give up traditional ways of living and conform to Western cultural practices and beliefs. One such pressure is the desire for Alaska Native families to subscribe to the Western nuclear family model and for men and women to fulfill Western gender roles. Traditional Alaska Native subsistence societies divided tasks and structured their society by gender. This gendered division of labor and society still allowed women to have power and influence within their community, and allowed them to gain status and become leaders as they mastered skills. Contact with Western society and pressure to modernize changed these traditional structures and divisions, often in ways that negatively affected women's status and power. Today, Alaska Native women are finding new ways to integrate traditional and modern gender roles and expectations, and are using them to reclaim their power and status, and to once again become leaders in their communities. Studies of women in leadership positions have shown that the values that are of importance to them are often different from the values traditionally associated with males in leadership positions. One of the main differences is the centrality of relationships to women in leadership positions. Studies also show that women in leadership place value on caring, responsibility to others, empowerment, interdependence, collaboration, and collegiality. Alaska Native communities before contact with Western civilizations contained gendered divisions of labor and social structures in which women became leaders by relying on and nurturing these female leadership values. In many cases, these values were important to both men and women in positions of power. Before contact with Western cultures, traditional Alaska Native communities used gender as a basis in the division of labor and to create structure in their society. This is not unique to their culture, as is a common and strong pattern that hunter-gatherers tend to organize their space, tools, and production based on culturally performed and perceived divisions between men and women. It is often assumed that the tasks performed by women were of less importance than the men, who performed the bulk of the hunting, and that therefore women's place in society was of lower status than men's. Recent studies have shown that though women's tasks were far from expedient, simple, or irrelevant, and allowed women to gain status in their community as they became masterful at those tasks. Although women were not usually involved in the hunting of big game, they did collect subsistence food such as berries, grasses, and fish. They were also involved in the production of gear essential to the hunt, such as parkas, mittens, and footwear. In addition, women were responsible for cleaning, preparing, and storing much of the meat from hunts. They were also responsible for distributing the food among family and community members. In these ways, women could gain status in their communities by becoming skilled at making goods. They also had the power to control the essential food supplies and could gain esteem and status by being generous with food supplies, but also effectively managing the food so that all needs were met. The gender division of labor, rather than subjugating one gender, allowed Alaska Native women to have power and status within their communities. We can also see that this gender division of labor allowed women to work with the female leadership skills. They were interdependent on each other and responsible to each other, making equipment for others and sharing food and tools. Their jobs required collaboration as they worked together to process the food, to cook the food, and to distribute it to others. And central to all of these tasks were the relationships that were built among members of the community. The gendered social structure of the Yupik people also created a system of balance between the genders. The Yupik communities each contained one or more men's houses for the men and boys of the community, and several village houses in which the women and girls lived. Archaeological studies have shown that these houses were connected by subterranean tunnels. When in use, these tunnels served as means for women to build influence and authority within their community. The gendered social division of the Yupik meant that men and boys spent their time living and sleeping in the men's houses, with just occasional visits to the women's houses. Women were strictly forbidden from entering the men's houses except to bring daily food and water. In a paper in 2006, Frink argues that the tunnels made these gendered social barriers more permeable. The structure of the tunnel system also meant that the village houses became the domain of the women, as men were rarely there. Women had the power to control the food supplies and to rise to a leadership role among the family members occupying the village house. As women traveled through the tunnels to carry food and water, they encountered others from the village and so were able to connect with members of other households. The tunnels also served as a means of communication as sounds traveled down the tunnels from house to house. It is believed that the majority of the cooking was done near the tunnel entrances, so they also served as a gathering place for women. The community nature of the tunnels allowed women from separate households to interact with the larger community and display generosity and skills. In this way, by building relationships, they could gain status within their community. The gendered architectural structure of the Yupik people allowed both men and women to have separate domains of control while creating a system for these two domains to interact. A different gendered social structure was found among the Tlingit in southeastern Alaska. Tlingit society was based on two matrilineal moieties, the raven and the eagle. The status of women in Tlingit society was equal to that of men. They could own property, arrange or disagree to marriage arrangements, and children were members of their mother's clan. Both men and women served on clan councils that decided disagreements, and women could also become shamans. In Tlingit society, a woman's status in society was independent of her husband's. Women could gain or lose status and power through their actions and the relationships they built with others. Once again, this model of leadership focuses on values that are seen by Western cultures as female leadership values, but were important to all in Tlingit society. As Alaska Native communities experienced contact with Western civilizations, they began to be pressured and even forced to abandon their traditional gender roles and social structures and to conform to Western cultural expectations. Contact with Russian missionaries and eventually United States government put pressure on these communities to abandon many of their subsistence practices, to place more emphasis on male dominance and female subservience, the nuclear family unit, and the importance of the individual over the community's well-being. These pressures caused women to lose much of their traditional means of gaining power and status. Frink describes how pressure to live in nuclear family units in separate houses caused Yupik women to become isolated from one another and the community at large. They no longer had access to the communal information that was available through the tunnels. Pressure to assimilate to Western cultural values changed the lives of Tlingit women as well. There was more importance placed on patrilineal descent. In the Russian and other Western cultures at the time of contact, women were not allowed to be in positions of power, and there was pressure on the Tlingit to force their women to behave in the same way. Western cultures placed more value on competition and individual accomplishment, which was in direct contrast to the more female-centered leadership values present in traditional communities. Fleet writes that traditional Native societies were never male-dominated, and they did not use the predominant paradigm of leadership grounded in European male models. Russian missionaries and later governments attempted to change this dynamic. As Alaska became a U.S. territory and then state, the government became involved in the lives of Alaska Native people and began programs that were meant to help advance and modernize their ways. These policies and programs took local control away from the villages, and the impact of government on villages during the past quarter century, while often material beneficial in content, has been destructive in process. Alaska Native women and men were forced to assume a lower status within the state and stripped of much of their traditional heritage. Many government organizations that offered aid and services to Alaska Native women also contained assimilationist policies that attempted to teach women their proper role. Women lost power and status not only within their communities, but also in the larger world. As women's roles changed, they began to develop new avenues to maintain connections, preserve their culture, and gain power and control over their lives. Following the women's movement and the passage of ANCSA, more women began to work outside their homes. There was also a time of a resurgence of cultural identity and political empowerment for Alaska Native women. These changes in the dominant culture's belief in the gender roles of women has been beneficial for Alaska Native women. New opportunities for earning power and status have developed, and new leaders have emerged. Many Alaska Native women have found ways to integrate traditional cultural beliefs and values with modern ways of living. In a study conducted of 25 Inupiat women living in Anchorage in 1986, it was done in order to better understand how they were adapting their traditional beliefs and practices to life in an urban area. It was found that these women felt pressured to conform to Western beliefs about the role of women in the home, of how mothers should raise their children, and how women should socialize with one another. These women felt that the Western beliefs often directly contrasted with their traditions. The women in Anchorage developed sharing relationships with other Alaska Native women. These reciprocal relationships provided friendship, financial support, and access to traditional foods. Subsistence food is an essential part of maintaining cultural identity, and the women have reciprocal relationships with family members and friends in the villages. In return for store-bought goods, these people provide the urban-dwelling women with subsistence foods. This sharing serves a purpose beyond just providing good food. In addition, by sharing the food, they are fulfilling cultural values of sharing with those in need. Although the relationships may be somewhat limited by attempts to fit into the urban society, they are based closely on traditional values and allow women to gain status among their friendship circle through generosity, a sense of community, and building relationships with others. This new network of Alaska Native women and families places new importance on female leadership values. Alaska Native women have also begun to find an important place in the political system in Alaska. Beginning with involvement in the Alaska Native Brotherhood and Sisterhood, women have realized the importance of working for the preservation of their culture and the control of their lives, workplace, and education. Assimilation forced Alaska Natives to adopt Western gender roles. This assimilation caused women to lose the power and status that they held in traditional societies. As government policies have granted civil rights to Alaska Natives and the feminist movement helped women earn back status in society, Alaska Native women have begun to combine traditional values and relationships with modern politics in order to have the power to improve their lives and the lives of others in their communities. There is more that must be done in order to ensure gender equality for Alaska Native women. It has been suggested that what governments must do in order to make this happen is to offer mutual respect and assistance. They must be willing to give control of local issues back to Alaska Natives. They must step aside in many areas so that Alaska Natives can attempt to reconstruct honorable and dignified lives for themselves. Alaska Native women must be given the opportunity to earn back the power and status they once held.